Penguins general manager Kyle Dubas delivered his annual State of the Penguins address on Monday, and Pat and I are going to give our thoughts on his comments, plus what you could expect from the Penguins this offseason right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Amp. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, and you can follow Pat on all social media platforms at SynonyMforWet, and you can follow these shows' Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And Pat, welcome to the offseason, my friend. It is officially, well, we could say it's day 2 now because Friday was really day 1 with the locker cleanout day. But I guess today we can say it is day 2 of the offseason because Kyle Dubas delivered his annual State of the Penguins address, and he had a lot to say. I saw some people tweeting like, oh, he's beating around the bush with some of these answers. He's not saying too much. Trust me, people, he said a lot. And the biggest takeaway I had from this presser, he talked for nearly about 35 to 40 minutes starting at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. That's why this episode's coming out a little bit later than normal than it would be on Mondays and Tuesdays. But the biggest takeaway I had was that they're not really going to try and make the playoffs next season. To me, if they make the playoffs, they're exceeding expectations. Kyle Dubas said this multiple times during the presser that they don't just want to be like a one-off, oh yeah, we get back to the playoffs, it's all fine and dandy, but then we fall right back in the mushy middle and we start missing the playoffs for a few more seasons in a row. He still wants to get the team back to contention as urgently as possible, but he wants to do this the right way. He wants them to have the streak of making the playoffs back, 5, 6, 7 plus seasons, like we just saw with that long playoff streak here in Pittsburgh, and have them contending during all those years, as opposed to, again, making the playoffs for one season and then just kind of being stuck in neutral. Like, he doesn't want that to happen. So I think with that, he really admitted that he doesn't see them being big players in UFA free agency on July 1. He even said that he's not really going to be going after players that are over the age of 30. Beautiful news, by the way. I don't think they're really in the process to be doing that at this point. I still think they're going to mobilize a bit this summer with some changes on the back end. And by the way, man, he was not happy with the defense. He was asked about this multiple times during his presser, and he echoed Mike Sullivan's thoughts on Friday, saying that, yeah, our defense is a major problem heading into next season. And he specifically mentioned the left side. Like I have been saying on the show for the last couple of weeks that they badly need a top pairing left-handed defender to play on the top pairing. And Kyle Dubas kind of confirmed that. Like, yeah, like we're going to have to look at external options, whether it's via the trade market, whether we're trading and signing an RFA that a team doesn't want to sign, or they're having contract concerns, all that good stuff. And speaking of that, Kelsey Cermatch had a really good question of the Hockey News to Kyle Dubas about the rising cap, how it could affect roster building. And he said, yeah, we're most likely going to spend in the trade market or the RFA trade and sign market. He did mention offer sheets, but to me, he hinted that he's probably not going to go down that path, because he also hinted that teams are in a better situation now to match those offer sheets because we're not in the flat cap and everyone is gaining cap space, which he's right. Like I do think if a player gets offer sheeted, that team that has the player has a better chance of matching it because they can create more cap room and they already have more cap room. But that is the type of roster building that I do want to see this offseason. Trades, whether it's for a veteran or a young RFA that can come in here and help this team, not just for the short term, but for the long term. I've been saying it the last few weeks, and I'll say it again. They're not going to be major players for UFAs going after the players in the 29 to 32 range and signing those players to long-term deals that would probably rule them out for someone like a Mitch Marner. I know that's been talked about a lot, but especially after this press conference, really don't see that happening. I really don't have too many complaints overall. If there's one nitpick I have, Pat, is that he did talk about the goaltending situation, and he kind of said that, yeah, like he expects Jari and Ned to be back, but I don't think he's tipping his hand too much on that because he could look to move one or both of them. However, I will say this. If you bring back both of them, that's a failure to me. There's really no reason to bring back both of them. We've seen the inconsistencies with both of their games these last couple of seasons, and I don't think you can bring back both of these guys. However, he did say that they are going to be pushed. Yoel Blomqvist is going to push them, and he also did mention Sergei Murashov in there that is going to try and push them as well. But again, man, overall, I do not think they're going to be trying to make the playoffs this offseason. And if anything, they're going to try and shore up the left side of the defense and mobilize a bit and try to get some more younger pieces in there, whether it's some of their prospects that could be ready or some players that are RFAs or some other, again, younger players that are ready to play in the league. Like, that's the moves that you're going to see this offseason to me.
Absolutely. The other thing that, because I saw some of the takes as well, people were like, oh, he's sidestepping a lot of the questions. He's not answering directly. Guys, it's been quite a few years since Jim Rutherford was the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Rutherford might as well have walked up to the press conference podium with an LED sign saying exactly what he was going to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a certain style. There's certain GMs who are going to tell you exactly what they think and exactly what they want to do. Then you have others who don't answer anything. They talk in cliches, they talk in non-answers, and Kyle Dubas is the middle ground of that. He understands what parts he can be brutally honest about and tell you about. The quote that stood out to me from this press conference was him saying, and this is a direct quote, "The defense is a major concern at the NHL level," end quote. That's not sidestepping an answer. And yeah, is it stating the obvious? Of course it is, but you don't want him to do what Ron Hextall and other people who have been with the organization over the past 10 or so years do, where they tell you not to believe your lying eyes. Everyone knows the defense is bad. It would not be a good look for Kyle Dubas to go up there and say, no, I was very pleased with the efforts of our defense, and I thought they came together and blah, 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 blah. No, defense is bad. And for the goaltending, I think that is another part of what I was saying. I think everybody knows at this point that the Penguins need an upgrade in net. They have to either find a way to move on from one or both of Jari and Nedeljkovic and give themselves a chance to let Blomqvist and Murashov take over. Maybe Philip Larson plays into that equation in some way. But if they come out and say, yeah, we're going to move these guys, or we're going to look to move these guys, you lose all leverage.
Right.
Whether it's trades, whether it's buyouts, whatever, the minute you say that you're going to try to move them, they're not going to have any leverage to make a move. And we're talking about two guys who have struggled pretty mightily, and they know it. The Penguins staff knows it. The management knows it. But the last thing you want to do with goaltenders especially is bury them publicly, because they're already in a precarious position. So if he goes up there and cuts a promo on how bad Jari has been, that's not going to help him, because the one thing we are going to have to accept is you might be able to move Alex Nedeljkovic. It's not an expensive contract. There's 1 year left on it. He can be a solid 1B in the right situation. Jari is a completely different story. That's an expensive contract with term left on it, and his struggles are very obvious. So that'll be very difficult to move. So there's no reason for him to go up there and tip his hand. And at the end of the day, I think this is what you want to see at this point. They have a plan. They're going to stick to it. And if they make the playoffs next year, it's an overachievement. If they don't, we're still right on schedule for what they want to do. And you might not like that. I know that I said I think that there are some solid pieces in the foundation now to maybe get back. But at the end of the day, if your goal is to not just become a playoff team again who shows up in the first round, gets booted in 4 to 5 or 6 games, and you go home, that's not really doing a whole lot for your long-term franchise health. So their goal is to have a solid stable of talent that can come up and make this team both a contender for the playoffs and eventually, hopefully, a contender for the Stanley Cup. And it's going to take more than a season or two. It's going to take 2 to 3 to 4 for them to get this done. Now, hopefully with the rising cap, hopefully with some of these prospects who have already shown that they belong, and a couple who have been surprises like Harrison Brunick, you might be able in 2 years to be a surprise younger team that goes on a little bit of a run in the last year of Sidney Crosby, in the last year of Chris Letang, and we'll see what happens with Evgeni Malkin.
Right. I think the biggest thing is people just got to be patient. Like, they're not going to rush this thing this summer. That was also a big vibe that I got from the presser. They're not just going to make hope moves, panic moves, just to really rush this process along, because if you do that, it could go really badly. And that actually goes with a quote that Kyle Dubas had during this press conference. I'm going to say this to end the segment here because this is a diabolical quote. It reminds me very much of a Mike Tomlinism quote that you see with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, because Mike Tomlin, that's what we call those, Pat, the Tomlinism quotes, because he has a way with words that is just hilarious during his press conferences. And Kyle Dubas decided to add to that with this. And he said, you can hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up first. Just diabolical stuff from the GM of this hockey team. But again, he's not going to rush this. He's going to be patient, and they want to do this thing the right way so that they can be contending for a while. And that's why I will continue to say, I think the summer of 2026 going into that season is going to be when the big moves happen. They will have more than double of the salary cap space that they will have this summer. And that's so crazy, Pat, because they're going to have over 20 million of space this summer. And then with a couple of trades, if they want to, they could have upwards of 30 million if they really wanted to. But it's at least going to be a little over 20 plus. They're going to have over 40 million of cap space next summer. It is going to be a lot. And that's when I think the big moves are going to happen.
And the biggest thing that's going to help them when it comes to that is if you're trying to get a reclamation project, if you're trying to get a younger, talented player, you will have the ability to take on some bad deals, because all of the majority of their contributors that they're going to need for the next few years are locked up. They're not going to have to spend any big money on contracts. So you'll be able to call a team that's maybe starting to pull the chute, maybe is going to have to start facing facts that they have to rebuild. And you can take on something like Kevin Hayes to get a young player, a player who has 2, maybe 3 years max left on a bad deal, because you're going to have, compared to a lot of your competition, a massive amount of cap space. And you'll have the option to say, listen, we want this young guy, and we know that you're looking to do sort of a rebuild, a retool. So we'll take that $6-7 million contract off of your hands as well. That way we can facilitate this trade, get the young guy. We'll give you some assets back, but we get what we're really gunning for in a young, talented player.
100%. And again, I think the main moves you're going to see this summer are trades. He even kind of hinted that during the presser, that it looks like they're going to be way more active in the trade market than the free agent market, at least for UFAs. For RFAs, I think it's more likely, Pat, that they'll trade for an RFA than just offer sheet one, just because of, draft capital and players, teams can just match those offer sheets. But as I've been saying the last couple of weeks, I think you're going to see a lot of trades this summer, which, hey, I trust Kyle Dubas more with trades than I do UFA signings, at least so far with his tenure as Penguins GM. But that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to discuss a couple more takeaways that we have, including what Dubas said about Erik Karlsson and something interesting about Evgeni Malkin as well. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it is unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it is next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off. Here's what I love about Game Time. They have priority last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Their all-in pricing shows the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you panoramic seat views so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, of course, Dubas was asked about Erik Karlsson, a little bit about his future, and he did admit that the Penguins want to see more from Karlsson. and they want him to be more consistent as a Penguin. But he also did say, we expect him to be one of the people who pull us back to contention. That quote first put on Twitter by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Matt Vensel. And to me, of course, he's going to, what's the word I'm looking for here? Pump his tires, I guess, a little bit. He's not really going to show his hand that much. Though the vibe I'm still getting from that presser and the way that he answered it is that I think he's still going to get moved this offseason. Of course, he's going to say, like, yeah, we want him here to help us get back to contention. And in a little bit of a way, I wouldn't be that surprised that they kept him, but I still think as of right now, he's probably going to get moved.
There's two schools of thought on this that I think we need to approach the Erik Karlsson situation with. And it starts with what you just said. He is not going to tip his hand on something like this, because this is going to be a pretty consequential deal if it gets made, because you're moving out a ton of salary cap space. Now, I really don't see any team taking on the full deal. Now, obviously, we have to remember, because everybody loses sight of this, including us, that cap hit and money owed are two very different things in the modern NHL. He's a $10 million cap hit, but as far as I remember, he actually isn't commanding $10 million in salary over the next couple of years. It's less than that, but given the way his deal was structured, it's a $10 million cap hit. You also have the retention from San Jose from the trade a couple of years ago. But the way I look at that is, one, he's Erik Karlsson. His body of work speaks for itself. Has it been a disappointment in Pittsburgh? Yeah, it has, but he's still one of the best defensemen to have played in the modern era for everything that he does. So it would be both wrong and disingenuous to come out and say he stinks, because he doesn't. So you're going to pump his tires a little bit. On the other hand, the other school of thought on this is, if you're going to move him, which I think they should, you're going to have to talk about him in a way that pumps up his tires. You're also going to have to say, listen, we like this guy. We went out and actively got him. So we're not going to come out here and say he stunk, because one, he hasn't, and two, you're never going to say that. So you look at it this way and you think very similar to the Tomlinisms and all that stuff. And I'm also going to square this circle, pun absolutely intended, with pro wrestling, because this was WrestleMania weekend. They will give you hints of what is going to happen rather than beat you over the head with it. He's not going to come out and say, hey, part of my long-term plan is to get a bunch of assets for Erik Karlsson and free up a bunch of salary cap space. There are things he said about the defense needing to be better, the team needing to get younger, the team needing to be active in the trade market. You read all those quotes on their face and you think, all right, that's all obvious, and I get that. But you start putting it all together in the larger narrative and you think, okay, one of the things they're going to do is try to move Erik Karlsson.
Right. And the big quote that I probably should have led with was that Dubas said, my push would be his actions have to match his ambitions. Pretty big quote there. Can't lie, man. Like, that's definitely a damning quote about, I guess, his last 2 years here in Pittsburgh. But you're right. He's not going to go out here and say, like, oh yeah, like, he's available, give me a call. He's going to pump his tires. He's going to talk about a good chunk of his positives, but he's going to play things close to the vest. He's been doing that a lot during his Penguins tenure. Again, if I had to guess right now, I don't think he is on this team. Come on, right?
And the other thing, I got to give a hat tip, because he just continues to churn out the best content, in my opinion, for the Penguins, and that's Josh Yohe. He wrote a piece over the weekend about the Penguins should move on from Erik Karlsson. And one of the things he kind of brought up in that article was, this is a team that needs you have Sidney Crosby, the most serious leader to ever leader, but Erik Karlsson is a guy who is a legend, is a future Hall of Famer, but he has a bit of a casual attitude. And it's not, we obviously don't know what happens in game because we're not on the bench. We don't know what happens at practices and intermission because we're not in the locker room or anything like that. But you can kind of tell he's laid back, and not in a bad way. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't want to win or anything like that. But you look at what they're doing and you look at their prospect pool, there are a lot of guys coming up, especially on defense, who, and again, I don't want this to come off as disparaging to Erik Karlsson because he is a legend, but realistically, who would you want them to be under the tutelage of? Erik Karlsson or Chris Letang? And the thing is, I don't think Erik Karlsson is some locker room cancer. I don't think he's going to be a bad influence, but he doesn't give off total leadership vibes to me. Chris Letang, on the other hand, we know how much of a legend he is off the ice and on the ice when it comes to conditioning, when it comes to working out. And he's also a guy who, when you need it, is going to give you a quote that smacks you in the face with reality. He'll come out and say the team has stunk. He'll come out and say the team's not achieving what they need to achieve. Erik Karlsson, the last couple of years, has been a little defiant. He's been a little, oh no, we're not playing poorly. We're not doing poorly. We're doing great.
Well, he did crush the power play last year. Like, he went off about that in an article with Josh, which I actually really like to see that because, well, it was a top 10 unit in the league at the end of the season.
Yeah. But again, that was very obvious. You look at the way he kind of talked about his own play, and I can always appreciate confidence. I can always appreciate a guy believing in himself, but there didn't seem to be a lot of self-reflection from Erik Karlsson where it was, no, I'm Erik Karlsson. I'm great. I'm doing awesome. And it's like, I'm not going to say you're doing bad because you aren't, but let's not pretend like you're Ottawa Senators Erik Karlsson right now because you're not. Like, and again, I don't want any of this to come off as me saying I think he sucks. I think that he's been a bust, anything like that. But given where the Penguins organization is and where Erik Karlsson is as an individual, it might just be a divorce of necessity. It just doesn't fit with where they're trying to go. Great player. And that quote from Dubas, his actions have to match his ambitions. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. That means you have to be the top dog for the Pittsburgh Penguins, even on a roster with Chris Letang, on the back end. And he hasn't done that. He's been good. He's had his moments, but there has been rare moments where I would say he's the best defenseman on the Penguins roster. And if he wants to help this team get pulled back to contention, he's got to do that consistently.
See, I understand what you're saying. I disagree with you a little bit on your last statement because I think it's been obvious that he's been the best Penguins defenseman on this roster these last couple of years. At least for me, man. Like, I know he doesn't play that good at defense in his own zone. He was in the 1% 5-on-5 defense when he got here. We all know that.
But my point to that is, Hunter,
yeah,
it has to be every night.
It hasn't been every night.
There can be nights every now and then where he has a bad game and he isn't, but it needs to be like 90 to 10%. 90% of the time, he's the best defenseman on the Penguins roster. 10%, he has a rough night and he just doesn't do the things he needs to do. I would say it's probably more 60-40 over his time as a Penguin. And if, again, that gets to the Dubas quote of his actions need to match his ambitions. And I think he's right on that. So either way, I don't think it's fair to say that he's been bad as a Penguin. I just don't think it has been the fit they had hoped, and it's probably not going to be the fit they want moving forward.
I get what you're saying to a degree. I do think, part of it, maybe being 60-40 was like, yeah, has there been inconsistencies? Yes, but still, like, I looked at this defensive group these last couple of years, and again, still, to me, it's not really close. Like, Chris Letang's game has fallen off a cliff. I love Marcus Pettersson, but his game this year at least wasn't as good as it was last year. And then the rest of the defense, like Matt Grizzly's good on the power play, wasn't good at 5-on-5. They reacquired P.O. Joseph, but he really wasn't that good. Ryan Shea is a number 7 to me on this team. And Ryan Graves, he's had 2 years to show that he can play in the top 4 of this team, and he's completely lost his confidence. And at this point, I'm not sure he's ever going to get it back. Like, I'm not even sure he's going to be on this team next season. And for this season, like, again, I understand that he is very polarizing. I get that. And I still think they're going to move on. And I totally get why they will. I totally get it. If they do it, why they will. However, again, he was still tied for 5th in 5-on-5 points this season among defensemen. So if you look at points, Zach Werenski was first with 48. Cale Makar was 42. Rasmus Dahlin was 38, Quinn Hughes 35, and then there's actually a pretty good tie for fifth with Evan Bouchard, Erik Karlsson, Lane Hudson, Tomas Chabot, Adam Fox, Bowen Byram, and it goes down, well, Victor Hedman at 32, but still, pretty big tie for fifth among points at 5-on-5 for defensemen. He was still pretty productive at 5-on-5, despite how awful this team was this year. Were there inconsistencies? 100%. I have gone on the show plenty of times this past season saying that, yeah, they need more out of him. He hasn't been as consistent. This kind of reminds me a little bit of the Derek Brassard trade when I loved it. I thought it made perfect sense. They went all in to get him. You tried to really push your chips in. Derek Brassard didn't work here, and they moved on. Like, that was what happened. With Erik Karlsson, again, I applaud the trade. They acquired a 100-point defenseman from San Jose. You pushed out a lot of bad contracts to make it happen. I was a totally big fan of the move. I would do it again if I had to. But sometimes, things don't work out the way that you have wanted them to. And then, hey, you're forced to move on. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Derek Brassard situation. But I know we've talked about Karlsson a lot during this segment. We didn't even get to the Evgeni Malkin quote, which I felt was interesting. But we're going to get to that here coming up in the final segment. But again, they trade him. I'm totally going to understand it. I think it's likely. But I do think there have been some times this season where I think some fans have been or have gone a little too overboard with some of their takes about him. And I just think people just got to be, how do I want to say this? Maybe a little bit more fair. Because don't get me wrong, I get what you're saying. But again, to me, he is by far the best defenseman at this point. And I know people, that's not a big ring endorsement because how bad this blue line has been for the last couple of seasons. But I think that I'll do it for this second segment. Coming up to end the show, we're going to get to a quote about Evgeni Malkin that I found interesting and whatever else Pat wants to discuss, since he was also diving into a lot of the quotes after watching the presser as well. Before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our final sponsor, and that is Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports, College Football 25, Call of Duty, Fortnite, etc. as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Wi-Fi 6S6E and auto low latency mode advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscriber services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and so much more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. And Pat, there's really one other big thing that stood out to me during this presser, and it was a quote about Evgeni Malkin. I know some people are going to be talking about how Kyle Dubas didn't fully commit to Mike Sullivan returning, but Sullivan kind of said it himself during his presser on Friday that he intends to be the head coach. Dubas did say he's meeting with Sullivan on Tuesday. As of right now, he's going to return as Penguins head coach unless something weird happens where they mutually agree to part ways or something like that. But again, as of right now, I personally think that he's going to return. But Dubas really talked about Evgeni Malkin and how they want to find more consistency with his wingers next season. He still gave Gino credit for not letting that revolving door wingers impact his play. But biggest thing for me, I think that screams Billy Koivunen for next season. Put him on there for a full 82-game season. He has shown that he is ready. He was great down the stretch, 7 points, 8 games. He wasn't on Gino's wing for all those games just because, Gino, at times he was a little bit banged up, but still, as well with Rucker McGroarty at least as well. He started with Sid. Koivunen, once Gino came back, played with Malkin a little bit, and then when Rucker got hurt, Koivunen went up to the first line. But to me, I felt like Koivunen fit a little bit better with Malkin. I feel like he, at this point in his career, needs another good playmaker on his line to get him the puck. And I think this would make all the sense in the world to me. So I think, to me, this screams Billy Koivunen for a full 82-game season on his line for next year.
Right. And this has kind of been the story of Evgeni Malkin's entire career.
Yeah.
Is that he kind of plays second fiddle for everything, whether it's because he's on a team with Sidney Crosby or when it comes to the players he has at his disposal on his wing. So it's good of Dubas to acknowledge that. And I agree. I mean, you look at the way Ville Koivunen played, he has NHL puck distribution abilities just with the way he sees the ice, the way he makes passes, and it would be a phenomenal fit on Evgeni Malkin's wing. And I think that would get another year or two out of Evgeni Malkin because, one, the kid can skate. And that is really been kind of the decline of Evgeni Malkin's game for the last year or so is the legs just aren't there as much as they used to be. And that's understandable. He's pushing 40. He's not going to have the same level of foot speed, the same level of power just because of father time. So you totally understand that. And at the end of the day, he brought up a good point. And it's something that I've said as well is he still had a solid season, all things considered. And you look at the revolving door of wingers that he had all year long, it's impressive he was able to do that because he wasn't given much. So we'll see what they decide to do. But I do still think there's a good amount of hockey, not a significant time, but I still think there's good hockey to be had out of Evgeni Malkin. And you find him a good winger, it'll happen.
He also has shown that even when he misses a little bit of time, he more than has his legs. Again, it's kind of a little bit like load management in a way, Pat, where he misses a few games with, whatever small injury he has, he comes back, he looks like Prime Gino just because like he's a little bit older now and maybe at times it feels like he doesn't have his legs for a full 82 game season. But I still felt like when he was in the lineup this year, he contributed on a nightly basis. He just needs some better and more younger wingers to just help him out a little bit. Again, he's 38. He's going to be 39 next year, man. He needs a little bit of help at this point, especially going into the final year of his contract. Did you notice anything else that really stood out to you during this presser?
I mean, nothing really stood out that much, but I do appreciate, I said it at the top of the show, I appreciate that he's sticking to this plan because you look at the last 10 to 15 years in the Penguins organization, there was a lot of stopping and starting. There was a lot of we're going one way and then we're going to turn it around and go the other way. Right. And obviously a decade ago, we were on the precipice of getting the Penguins' second Stanley Cup in 2016. We were going into the 15-16 season with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. And it turned out to be consecutive Stanley Cup championships. But even after that, we saw, it looked like Rutherford was committed to making this team a little bit speedier, a little bit more skill. And then after the second Stanley Cup, all of a sudden he's back on his, we got to get bigger and tougher train. And it kind of derailed the progress that they had made. The Ron Hextall era, we don't need to relitigate it in this final segment, but it was concepts of a plan. You couldn't really figure out what he was trying to do. So to have that kind of consistency and dedication to what they're trying to do, rather than, oh, we had a 90-point season from Sidney Crosby and Rutger McGroarty and Ville Koivunen look like they're ready, so we're going to pivot hard and we're going to try to make this team a contender again. No, you want to have success for the long term. Yeah. So you have to commit to this for the long term. So at the end of the day, that was my biggest takeaway, is that this plan is in place. They are sticking with it and they are going to see it through. He even mentioned, Crosby's going to be grumpy because we're not going to make the playoffs. But again, I know that everybody wants to pull out their Crosby to
He signed up for this, people. Like, again, Pat, like, I know you were going to say that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but he signed up for this. He knew this was going to happen when he signed that contract extension last summer. And I know he's going to be grumpy, but he signed up for it. People don't need to feel bad for him, man.
And I don't see a world where Dubas BS'd him. I don't think Dubas sat down with him and went, no. Of course we're going to be contenders in 2 years. Just hang around. It's going to be great. He probably said, listen, this organization doesn't have prospects. It doesn't have young players. Don't have a lot of draft picks. I have to rebuild that. And I want you to be the guy who ushers in the next group that'll take this team back to contention. And he agreed to it. So unless he suddenly has a change of heart, he's here for this. He signed up for it. So, but the other side of that, as I've said multiple times, he's still Sidney Crosby. He is going to help these kids, and he is going to set a standard in this organization that will last longer than his career. So we will see what happens with that, but I'm very happy that they are sticking to this plan and they are going to see it through.
This might be more hopium than anything as I end the show. I am more confident in this quote unquote plan right now than I was 6 to even 12 months ago. I am confident in it, but the biggest thing is go out there and prove it. Go out there and execute, because at the end of the day, the results are going to be what matters more than anything. Again, Pat, I can sit here and keep saying, like, I'm more confident today than I was, but you need to go out there and show why I am confident. You need to go out there and make the necessary moves to bring this team back to being a contender. Again, not going to be this offseason. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this season. But the next offseason, especially when I think there could be big moves coming, I need to see how this front office can really roster build into this next wave of a contender. That's going to be where the big results lie, and then we can really judge Kyle Dubas' full tenure at that point, I think, as Penguins GM and president of hockey operations. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We'll be back with another show for you all on Tuesday. Probably going to start our season in review series. We'll probably start with our captain, of course, Sidney Crosby, but that'll take us through the month of April, well into the month of May, and all that good stuff. So look for that in any other Penguins news. And of course, we'll be discussing the Stanley Cup playoffs along the way as well. So for Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll be back on Tuesday.